coordinated role in terms of building those networks, maintaining those networks, both locally but also connecting to other places. There's a really important role there for the public sector to play. And as I mentioned, also attraction and retention of younger workers in rural areas continues to be a major problem. And finding ways to make rural areas more appealing to that demographic, I think, is also a major issue that needs to be dealt with. So I'm now going to turn it over to somebody who has been building these networks and doing very good work in Prince Edward County, Dan. Thanks, Greg.
So when I was doing work with Greg on statistics, I was really delighted to find the answers because we're statistically deficient, and while when we started looking at the creative economy quite a few years ago, it was based on anecdotal, meaning looking around your community. Small enough community you can do that. And Craig Desjardins and I had a meeting, and the early data was coming in that rural areas typically had 12–14% creative occupations. I was getting a little nervous because that would have foiled sort of the theory that I was already putting into practice. And what we learned through Greg's map is that Prince Edward County is one of the most concentrated rural areas with creative occupations. We're at about 31.5%, just below the provincial average of 35%. And I don't remember the rural, but like probably double the rural average. So Greg made a truth teller out of me, and I appreciate that. And it was interesting, Yolanda and I were having a chat a week or two ago, and I understand, I don't know if it's any people in this room or not, but some people on this campus are not believers of the creative economy. I can't believe it. Well, I'm going to talk to you about a place, and I'm not going to get into too much theory, I'm going to get into reality. And we've aligned the creative economy concepts with the reality that's going on in Prince Edward County. And hopefully we can have some fun with that. I'm going to talk high-level theory, try and define it a little bit for our area. I want to talk about geography a little bit, because urban and rural are issues that need to be understood a little bit. Talk about our journey. The phrase that we use is we are undergoing a huge rural renaissance. I think that's a great word for creative economy. I think economically people can understand what that means as well. And then we're going to talk about some case studies. I'm a practitioner, so I respect theory. It's real, and we're doing it, and it's wonderful to be part of that pretty exciting thing going on. Greg touched on it, so creative economy. People tell me all the time, how can you be doing that? That's an urban thing. Rural economies can't be creative economies. It's just urban because of density, et cetera, et cetera. I sat in on a conference where Richard Florida was speaking. I'd never heard of him before. I'd never heard of the creative economy. And I walked away after that conference. I was scratching my head, and the conference was called Creative Places and Spaces. So I was driving home trying to think of derelict warehouse buildings that we would have. And I forgot we had a whole airport from World War II that had those things. But then it dawned on me, it wasn't about space per se. It was about the makeup of your community and the creativity in there, and the, you know, in our case, density in terms of sheer numbers, 32% creative occupation. So I have made my living almost from day one from, in economic development they call it R&D, rob and duplicate, beg, borrow, and steal. My job is to, I think, find out what's successful and figure out how to tweak it and adapt it for our community. And that's, so I thought, why not rural? We had a bohemian culture, we had artists, we had quality of place, we had all these things. We had the talent. We have a very tolerant community, and not exactly sure why, except it's all loyalists, and it's not that everybody's related to each other, but there's a lot of familiarity, and you have to be polite in a community, watch what you say, because you might be offending somebody's relative. So I'm not sure if that's where our tolerance comes from. And it could just be, the good nature of an agricultural rural community. So everybody talks about urban because that's where the phenomena started. Quite frankly, that's probably where the money is as authors and as I don't know about academics, but people that specialize in that. And I choose not to pit rural against urban. What I've noticed in my community is there are rural and urban interdependencies. So in the case studies I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to talk about how urban needs rural and rural needs urban, and it's all good. And it's about thinking about a collective geography. We're calling it the Golden Triangle for our region, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. That's really where the wealth and the population center is. Florida calls it mega region. We're comfortable with whatever term. So what is the creative economy, creative rural economy? We're at the provincial level now trying to come up with some definitions. But at the heart of it, it's about, why would we focus on it? Because it's about prosperity. And the creativity and the new economy part is about innovation. And it's about wealth creation. At the end of the day, economic development, its core mission is either wealth preservation, i.e. retention, or expansion and attraction. So our job is to look at how do we create wealth and manifest wealth in our communities. We did a strategic plan in 2004. It said we had zero competitive advantage in attracting classic manufacturing. I was just at an economic developers conference. That model, more or less, is a dated model of factory hunting. Employment in factories was 50% in 1950. It's 12.5% and shrinking in Ontario every year, whereas creative was, say, 5% in 1905. 35% now, and probably will hit 50% in the next decade and change. So if you're in the economic development game, you don't ignore other things. You have to have a big scope, but you have to fish where the fish are, and where there are greater returns. So that's sort of where we're looking for those types of things. We are learning through our work with Kevin Stolaric to get away from the creative industries language. And it's really about creative workers and creative occupations. They permeate all industries. So in auto manufacturing, which is not a creative industry, there are creative workers there. There are business managers, designers, engineers, etc. And that's sort of where we're focused. In a rural community, especially one like ours, which has never had very large companies, we're really talking about a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs. That's our target market. I say ones and twos. Craig and I are working on an exciting 40-person company now, and we learned from Stats Canada if you get that company and you plug in that data, it turns into 150 jobs with all the spin and whatnot. So we're kind of advancing now, maybe from the ones and twos to the 5s and 10s and the 10s and 20s, etc., as we're sort of building our economy. So our journey, this is Dan's interpretation of the short creative history of Prince Edward County. In the 70s, when you could buy a home for $10,000 or $20,000 in Prince Edward County, and we were the Queen Street West of rural Ontario. So as people from Toronto and New York, artists migrated to cheap rents in Queen Street West and Soho, some people did that on a rural basis in Prince Edward County. One of our artists, his story is, the info to the real estate agent was, find me a place where I could cover the mortgage for $200 a month. Can you imagine that? That was in the early 80s. Bill Reddick, who served Barack Obama with his handmade pottery from Prince Edward County. So the artist discovered Prince Edward County. When I say discovered, in this new sort of revitalization, not the loyalists and not the agricultural people that were there for a long time. In the 80s, again, artists are usually on the leading edge. Boomers started to discover it a little bit. And we were still kind of a cash crop commodity agricultural area, and what I call sort of a commodity tourism area, a lot of camping and campgrounds. And then between the 80s and the 90s, tourism started upscaling. We had some, B&Bs first, and then B&Bs started having en-suites, which they didn't have, started getting spa, etc. And then, really the dawn of the 21st century is when